Hi, Without Diminishment subscribers. We're back for another in our BC Leadership Series. I'm Alexander Brown, co-founder of, managing editor, also director of the National Citizens Coalition, writer, communicator, campaigner. Bruce Banman joins the show, and we're editing in a new intro here because since we recorded this on Friday, Bruce has dropped out of the race and thrown his support behind Yuri Fulmer. It's still a terrific chat. Enjoyed hearing so much about the foundational times and moments with the BC Conservative Party. Important to hear about Bruce's principles and where he views, the puck going with modern conservatism. So if you enjoyed this chat, please like and subscribe. Bruce Banman joins our BC Leadership Series. Bruce is an MLA for Abbotsford South, former House Leader and Party Whip, former Mayor of Abbotsford. Bruce, thanks for coming on.
Hey, more than welcome, and you can toss chiropractor and was on council as well for Abbotsford as well on there.
Oh, amazing. I should have known to expand the CV. I wanted to start by saying I'm a big fan of your slogan, conservative without apology. There's so many of just this person for BC or doing it for you. It's like, no, it's conservative without apology. Thanks for putting that out there.
Well, for those who know me, I mean, when I crossed the floor, that gave it the official party status. So I have said before, I'm one of the two OGs. There was John and I, the two old goats, maybe. But I asked some pretty rough questions when I crossed the floor, and I don't apologize for them. Actually, it changed the conversation. I think actually helped change the pendulum of when I asked questions they would have been considered pretty far over to the right, I guess, in some people's minds. Now it's pretty much mainstream. There's a lot of things that we were pushing at the beginning of the crest, I guess, of change that's happening throughout Canada and especially British Columbia, and happy to have been part of that change.
Yeah, we've seen that Overton window expand so much in the last few years, especially out here, which to our audience is sort of the ever-sliding permissible structure of what is and is kind of acceptable, and what was unacceptable to say a few years ago, such as, say having a concern about public land use or land acknowledgements, is now, hey, the average person is allowed to go, hold on a second, like I think that the road to somewhere good might have gotten us into trouble here. Bruce, we're taping on a Friday. It's March 13th. The jobs numbers came out today federally.
Yeah, lucky Friday 13th.
Yeah, it's very fitting. You've previously stated that social issues are important, but the economy must be BC's number one priority. Would you say that these February job market numbers, this data showing our worst job losses since the tail end of the COVID years and outside of the pandemic response era, this is our worst since 2009. Would you say that solidifies that stance?
Absolutely. Look, you want to see people's ideals and their moral compass change.
Yeah.
When things get dire, all kinds of things go out the window, because when you cannot house nor feed yourself, you get desperate. And desperate people are capable of doing things that normally they would not. And so in fact, I think some of the discussions that we have on the social side of things actually mask real problems. Let me put it in perspective. If you're married and you have financial difficulties in your marriage, little things like you didn't pick up your socks become big things.
Yeah.
And because you can't do anything sometimes about the financial situation you're in, so that tiny little things just exacerbate, and you end up fighting over these, what normally you could care less about, become really big deals. And it's based on financial pressures. And I think for me, I say the economy is important because we want healthcare, we want education, we want roads and infrastructure. The things that we want are paid for by taxes which come from the economy. And what you've seen in this budget is when you run out of a bad economy, when your economy starts to drop, you then have to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into people's pockets in order to pay for the things that you've promised, or you do cuts.
Yeah.
And what this NDP government has done in this budget is they've managed to tick off absolutely everybody. Nobody's happy with it. And they've now targeting seniors. And the example of targeting seniors is those that signed up for what on your home, if you own a home, you can defer your taxes so that it, when you're, it comes out of your estate when the home gets sold after you're gone. And what this government did is not only did they change the rule, and once you've signed up for it, in order to get out of it, you got to pay back what you've already put in. So you're now stuck between a rock and a hard spot. So they've taken it from 2% below prime to help seniors stay in their homes. And there's lots of good reasons why we want to keep them in their homes, because putting them into long-term care facilities, as an example, is really expensive for taxpayers. Now they've gone to, it's 2% above prime, and they're now compounding the interest. They have added 0.5% on minimum wages for taxes. So you run out of businesses to tax because your economy is starting to drop. So you have to go after people. And that's exactly what this budget is doing. And they will continue to go after more and more and more and dig deeper and deeper because, as per usual with the NDP, they don't understand how to balance a checkbook. They don't understand how money works. And they have treated small business in particular, which is the backbone of our economy, as if they're the enemy. That somehow, providing jobs for others, you're some kind of villain because there's a profit in it for you at the end of the day. Yeah. It's stinking thinking. You've got to have a robust, vibrant economy because a small sliver of a really large pie is, to me, the way to go. And so, let's take a look at some of the things we could do very short term to balance the budget. There are 24 mines in British Columbia that want to open up. They are mired in red tape, and it takes approximately 15 to 20, the average is 17 years, to open up a mine. That's half of somebody's working career. Those 24 mines, I'm told, would produce $70 billion worth of economic stimulus per year. And more importantly than that, that's good enough because these are great paying jobs, right? It would give the government $10 billion worth of royalties every single year. Then you take the natural gas deposits that we have. We have $1 trillion that's capped, ready to go. While we've celebrated building one natural gas terminal, the United States have built 15 of them, and they're building more, and they're selling our natural gas at an 80% discount, which should be money that we get. But that would be another 4 to 6 billion. Well, the 10 and the 4, that's $14 billion worth of taxes going directly into the provincial budget. If we could get those two things alone, it would actually fix the deficit without having to do any cutbacks, without having to do any layoffs, without doing all of the things that we have. We'd be able to actually balance the budget. That's just one example of how incompetent this government is, and what they have done is they have actually put so much uncertainty in the province that people are leaving in droves, businesses are leaving in droves. As a matter of fact, I think the number coming out today is it's another 4,000 to 6,000 people have left this province.
Yeah,
they're on mass exodus. And starting to, because take a look at the world. We have seen Europe hit with a huge amount of people that are leaving wherever they're from to go to Europe to try and find a better way of life, because where they are, they cannot feed nor house themselves. They're starving, so they look for opportunity somewhere else. British Columbia is now going through the exact same thing, and unless we intervene, we'll continue to see that trend.
Yeah, I moved a year and a half ago. I moved out from Ontario with my wife, and we sort of felt the call of the West Coast. And we're not leaving; we want to be part of the solution. But you arrive here, you love looking at the mountains, you appreciate your run by the ocean, and then you start to settle into the economic reality and go well, I guess Alberta is calling for some people too. And so you have to get ahead of that, right? It can't always be net outflow at this point.
Well, and I have family that lives in Ontario, in Barrie, and I've been there in the fall. It's beautiful. But I was always hoping when I got over the next bump to see a mountain. What do you see? You see the next little roll, right?
Yeah, no, it's a different. Yeah.
In fall it's beautiful, but there in Barrie, which is in the snow belt, I just take a look at how much the snow beats everything up over there. And here, especially in the Lower Mainland, our snow comes down in a liquid form, and it stays up in the mountains, and it's as you found out, it's beautiful. This province is so diverse. I think we've got it all. It is an amazing province, and in addition to that, we have all the economic opportunity right here. We're actually one of the richest places on the face of the earth if you include all of the natural resources that we have. And these arguments that we're having don't need to be had, because we should all be doing really, really well based on what we've been blessed with.
We should be the economic engine of Canada, and I think that this is a really interesting year for BC, especially with the leadership that you're running for, and I think of even the branding for Canada Strong and Free in Vancouver in April, which is conservatism's new frontier. We actually get to be a main character. We're not, as Jason Kenney has called the NDP, the out here the mud hut wing. It's like we're done with degrowth. We're done with just defenestrating on every issue. We're done with being just treated like a backwater. Look at the abundance at our doorstep, in our mountains, on our coasts, the lumber. We have all these mills that are closing, all this opportunity for naught, all these mines being ensnared in red tape. I wanted to touch on
the NDP, the no development permit.
There you go. No development party, no development permit. Yeah.
No to progress. There's a whole bunch of them.
We could go on all day.
We could, yeah.
So in 2023, as you mentioned, you famously crossed the floor to join now former BC Conservative leader John Rustad, granting the BC Conservatives official party status. That helped set in motion the party on the ascendancy we see today. What went into that decision then for our viewers? Was it a calculus of the heart or mind? Was it both?
It was a number of things. Excuse me. It was a number of things that went into that decision. I never thought that I would cross the floor. I never thought I'd be that guy. Out here in Abbotsford, I don't know what we got in the water, but I would be the number 3 in a row.
Oh, wow.
That effectively crossed the floor. There's debate whether Darryl Pleck has crossed the floor or not. There's debate on that one, but he definitely broke party ranks, and I never thought I would, but I was watching what was going on, and really what was going on with the Liberals at the time was the party of the right, yeah. Right? And for those that are jumping all over the fact that you're a former BC Lib or you're a former this,
I hate that talking point. It was what it was, right?
Yeah. Let me just say that politics is about growing a movement, not narrowing it down into slivers. You're never going to form government if you keep narrowing it down into slivers. I don't care who you voted for in the past. I don't care who you donated for in the past. If the NDP is no longer working for you, come join us, please. Just come join us.
Yeah.
But when my decision then was, I was watching what was going on. Every time the leader spoke, it was getting worse. And at that time, the attitude was, because Horgan had won with such a huge landslide, that there needed to be a shift to the left. I would say that really what happened was, if you look at Horgan, what Horgan had done was actually shifted the NDP to the right. And I think we missed the cues. And really what was also going on across the country at that time was there was a huge movement to the right. Which really was a movement away from Trudeau as well, right? And I'm looking at what was going on. I'm listening to people, as you said, there's a whole bunch of things that I talked about then, such as SOGI 123, such as, the type of literature we have in our schools that I thought was inappropriate. Talking about, as you're saying, people started questioning things like, what are we doing when we actually use the word unseated?
Yeah.
And we were, where was as we're watching our economy come to a screeching halt, and I was picking up on all of these signs and listening to, I've always had what I think is that good beer parlor talk, or the kitchen table talk, what people are actually saying around their tables. I've always had a pulse of that, right? Maybe it's because I grew up, kind of rural. Even though I was in the Lower Mainland, I grew up rural, grew up on a farm, had chores to do. Nobody gave me anything in my life to speak of. I've had to do it all on my own, with my wife and I. I've got a big extended family, but it's not like somebody said, look, here's $100,000, go play with that and see what you can do with it. It just never happened. So I was picking up on all of these things that people were saying and the anger that people were going through because life was getting tougher. Even back then. What's happened now is that this government thought that they could just write a check and start spending their way to out of where they were going without having a business plan. And I listened to my constituents. I listened to the pulse of the province, and I just happened to be at the beginning of the wave. There was no safety net when I crossed the floor. John got kicked out, but I'm the one that actually went across willingly.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people have said that, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. One person came up to me and said, Bruce, you didn't follow British Columbia politics. You changed it. You tossed it on its head. And I just was doing what I always do, which was listen to the people in my riding, listen to the pulse, and I am a servant of the people. And when you get out of step with what the people want, they have a tendency not to vote for you because they look for somebody who does. They kick you out. And so I just listened, and I got part of it is luck. Part of it was just having an astute ear to what people were actually saying. And the third part is having the courage to stand up and actually say it.
And good for you doing that, especially with the lack of air cover, which means I think an understandable criticism, I think, of our political sphere now, which is that you see people, MLAs, MPs, MPPs, seemingly working to protect their job, as opposed to the actually listening to their constituents. Bruce, I wanted to ask you, touch on it. For all the talk of ascendancy within the party right now, the new polls back that up. Great to see the gulf growing between the BC Conservatives and the NDP with committed voters. We did witness a kind of rocky stretch following the provincial election and the narrow loss to the NDP. During the leadership review, you were one of John Rustad's most vocal defenders. You go way back. Looking back, that internal division eventually led to a leadership change. As you now seek the leader's chair yourself, how might your approach to managing internal dissent in caucus, the unity aspect, differ from the final months of the Rustad era?
Well, first off, I was the whip, so my job was to protect the leader. That's the whip's job. I did the job as best as I could. I gave John lots of advice. Some of which, and I'll put this in perspective. Those that have had a supervisor, a boss, as a chiropractor, my job was to give advice to people all the time. And I always respected whether they took it or not. Same thing with John. He made some calls that I would not have made. And I'll go back to when I became a mayor and what I was a mayor that was able to provide a 0% tax freeze. I did that in very challenging times because it was after the crash, the mortgaging and housing crash in the United States when the economy was bad. When I got elected, I said, what do I know about running a city? I'm a chiropractor. What I do know how to do is to build a team and to motivate people and get them together. We are at a similar place. So the criticism, if loyalty is a criticism, hey, criticize me all you want. I'll take that criticism all day long. I was loyal to my boss. I gave him advice. Sadly, some of the key points that I talked about, he chose not to follow. If John had a fault, and John will tell you this himself, is that he was very much inside his own person. He was a bit of a lone wolf, And one of his skills was not necessarily gathering a bunch of people around him. Sometimes, even though I was number two, I felt as if I was on the outside looking in because I couldn't crawl into John's head and actually get what he was thinking. I have a tendency to build a team around me and say, okay, what do we need to do? I will make the ultimate decision, but I want input from the team, and a lot of it I will delegate out and say, look, I often used to say when I was the mayor, my job is to direct the boat and say, okay, we're heading to Hawaii. It's not up to me to tell everybody how much gasoline we need to put in or how much fuel we need and how many cans of beans so that we don't starve together. You have to delegate some of this stuff out and rely on finding the best people around you to help. So, for instance, in the mining industry, the first thing I would do is I would get a bunch of mining executives in the room and say, okay, what do we got to do to fast track this so that we can open this place up so we can provide those jobs that are worth $100,000 to $150,000 a year? What do we got? And that's what those jobs pay, by the way, driving those trucks with overtime anywhere up to $150,000 a year. And you don't need a university degree to drive them. It's a great job for almost anyone, and for the ladies out there, we learned on Site C that actually they would actually prefer to hire the ladies than the men because the ladies A to B it. Us boys, we have a tendency to cowboy it. I know what I'm like, So they were actually better on the equipment. Just ladies, so you know. So I think that what you do is you gather people around you that are smarter than yourself. And in medicine, again, as a chiropractor, I had to know where my laneway was. And when I got into trouble was when I thought I knew better than a specialist. You need to understand when you are in over your head and ask for help. And there is no shame in that. And if you start with that attitude, I think you're able of doing great, great things. And then make sure that you... it's not about Bruce Banman. It's about the team. I would rather stand behind someone and clap and give accolades. As a matter of fact, when we were on the campaign team, I would bring the MLAs that were in the riding up and say, hey, I think you need to hear from them, not me. When it was question period, for instance, one of the things I pushed for and John listened to was getting the entire team up to ask a question. Because they get to do a clip to go back to their riding and say, see, I'm fighting for you and you're riding. So you build that team around you, listen to the team, and as a mayor, actually, that's also good training grounds because mayors actually don't control council. It's the other way around. Council tells mayors what they have to go do. Now, you have influence as a mayor, but it's the council that actually makes the decision, and as the mayor, you're the spokesperson for mayor and council. Mayor only has one vote like everyone else. And I believe that that's how you build a great team, is by actually listening to people and then we've got some fantastic individuals right now elected that are experts in their field. Cut them loose, say, okay, what do we do? Come back with a report and tell us what we got to go advocate for and fight for to get this economy moving or to help whatever ministry they may be in. What do we got to do? Give me your game plan and the three things you want to change immediately. Short-term, long-term, mid-term goals. Give me those goals and what we need to do.
It's a team sport. I wanted to close with a question on DRIPA. Obviously... touching on sort of the key pocketbook issue increasingly for many in the province, whether it's the Cowichan decision concerns, the Musqueam agreement over Vancouver, conflicting claims coming up since, now word coming from Coquitlam that there's a Coquitlam challenge ongoing. Can we go on like this? Would you repeal it? How do we get this back on the rails to ensure property rights, public confidence, investor and business confidence?
Well, it's interesting. We just had a proposal, a private members bill put on the floor that actually was going to open up all of this and protect private property rights. And the NDP government, on a first reading, a lot of people don't understand how motions come through. Yeah. And the NDP played some games because we voted yes on a first reading. Well, you're supposed to vote yes on a first reading because you can't even read what's in the bill until after that. It's merely procedural to be put on the floor. The UK, for instance, it's automatic.
Yeah, they've
Then
developed
you
a real
debate.
problem with that, with
Yeah.
shutting things down at first reading.
Well,
Yeah,
a no vote, however, is more important.
right.
The no vote says you don't even want to talk about it, and that's what the NDP said about protecting private property rights. You know, the bill that could have been on the floor could have been garbage. Yeah, again, you don't read it. You know, it's just a proposal until you actually read it. But they out for now said, no, we're not even going to open this. We're not even going to open up private property rights for discussion. That should be very, very concerning to people out there. With regards to DRIPA, here's the basic problem, and I'm going to take you up to the 30,000 foot level. And I've talked with First Nation chiefs, right? I went to school with some of these guys, right? And they're not happy with DRIPA either. And I'll give you the one First Nation chief that I was talking to. He says, you know, I want to go put a proposal on my reserve now, on my first, you know, my lands. I now have to go consult with all of the reserves around me. I will pull out the expletives that he used about what he thought about that. It takes 100% agreement amongst everyone, and nobody's the final decision maker. That's the problem with DRIPA. And we need to, somebody's got to be the ultimate decision maker on behalf of all British Columbians, all of them. That has to be government. Do you need to consult with First Nations? Yes, and that's what UNDRIP was really. People get that confused. UNDRIP was designed so you don't run a pipeline through a burial ground, as an example. Yeah. That you consult with First Nations and say, okay, what do we do? And again, the province is so rich that there's more than enough money for us all, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. But somebody's got to actually decide this. What David Eby did, and the NDP have done, because wasn't just David Eby, there's a whole bunch of NDPers, that MLAs that all voted for this nonsense as well, and refused to talk about it, and now still refuse to talk about it, if this week was any indication. We need to bring everybody back to the table and say, look, this is the problem, and the problem with the 100% agreement is you can have a reserve with as little as 20 or 30 people on it that hold up for a better deal, and it could take 50 to 100 years to get anything done. It is a recipe for disaster. We need to enshrine private property rights. And for those that say, well, we'll just cut a check, if they all of a sudden Musqueam decides that they now own those lands, and the problem is nobody really knows. It's the uncertainty and the not knowing of, look, what does this actually mean? Because everybody their wallets disappear, they refuse to invest. And even now, to either add more confusion to it, with the BC assessments, there was a little bit put in there that if your assessment drops, potentially because of a land claim, it doesn't really say that you're still going to have to pay the same amount of taxes. So you're a bit this is just a nightmare in the making and a mess. What it requires is certainty. My fight is not with First Nations, not with my school buddies I went to school with. I love these guys. Government bureaucracy and government inability to actually have a rational discussion is creating conflict. I don't like it. My fight is not with First Nations people. My fight is with governments that are hiding behind closed doors, doing secret deals, and not even talking. We now know, for instance, in the Cowichan deal and the Musqueam deal, well, Squamish isn't happy with this. I've got Stolo chiefs that are unhappy with the Cowichan decision. They're not even talking with First Nations, let alone with the rest of us. It is a recipe for disaster. It needs to stop. Calmer heads need to prevail. And we need to figure out how to share the resources of this great province, of which we have trillions and trillions of dollars worth. We should all be doing well. There's no reason for it. It just needs somebody calm to sit down at the table and have real discussions and to have them transparent. As a matter of fact, this government just passed laws to make FOIs even tougher to get, or they're in the process of it. None of this is good. I believe that policy should be transparent, and there's a saying in politics that sunlight is the great sterilizer. Opening the books up and allowing people to actually peek inside is a good thing. They shouldn't have to ask for it. They paid for it with their taxes. That information should be, that you paid for it, you should have access to it as a taxpayer.
Hey, it's the dire moment to get it fixed. Bruce, you're a conservative without apology. Thank you for joining our BC Leadership Series.
It's a pleasure, and I'll just say this, whether it's me or somebody else, there's only one way that you can actually participate in this great race. That's to spend $25, become a member, pick out who your horse is and bet on that, and it's 1 through 4. If I'm not your first choice, give me number 2 or number 3, but it will be a ballot. But the only members of the party get to participate in the vote. You want to have a say? This will be the most important time, because who will most likely be our next premier may be decided by as few as 40,000 people in the province. And that means that your vote is probably more important now than it will be during a general election. So spend the money, pay attention to the leaders, and participate in this great thing we call democracy.
Make it happen, folks. Join the Big Tent, Big Tent Professional. Bruce, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Take care.